Welcome to My Hometown, the program that explores clubs, organizations, businesses, and issues across Nassau and Suffolk counties and sheds light on the different towns that are making a difference.
Hello and welcome to My Hometown. I'm Bill Horan, along with my co-host, Nassau Community College student Mike Demarco.
Bill, I believe that children are our future. You teach them well and let them lead the way.
Mike, I think those words come from Whitney Houston.
Well, that may be true, but I know that they are true for our guest today, too.
Today, we're going to learn about a nonprofit organization right here on Long Island called Gateway Youth Outreach. GYO's goal is youth development and preventing adverse behavior by enhancing community efforts to provide an environment where adolescents can develop self-awareness while engaged in productive and healthy pursuits.
Our guest today is Patrick Boyle, the Executive Director of Gateway Youth Outreach. Patrick, welcome to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Thanks very much.
Can you start off by telling us more about Gateway Youth Outreach and how it got started?
Yeah, Gateway Youth Outreach was started in about 1974, I believe. The reasoning behind it is that they found that many children were not engaging in projects in school or even with family. Families were being torn apart a little bit at that time as young people got a little bit rebellious and stayed out more and hung out in parks and things of that nature. So instead of having the young people come to us, we went to the young people. Gateway Youth Outreach, as it's called, reaches out to the kids in the community where they hang out so that way we could discuss with them issues they may be having in the community or whatever they feel like they would like to talk about.
So you're like Mr. Softy. You go to them.
Correct.
All right.
No ice cream.
No ice cream, but you're there for them. And actually, that's a great approach because sometimes kids and even adults, we don't know something is there. And if you reach out or put a sign or something, we can contact you and get more involved. So good approach.
And so Gateway Youth Outreach, what is it all about and how exactly do you reach out to people or young individuals?
Well, things have taken a little bit of a turn since we first started there.
Mm-hmm.
I began working there in 1989, and it still was that approach of getting out into the community and doing what you needed to do there to engage young people. But now we've kind of taken it more inside. We have after-school programs for young people. Each day we have approximately, before COVID, I should preface that because now COVID has made things a bit different. But each day we have approximately 800 kids in 4 schools that we work with to provide after-school programming, which includes homework assistance, a snack, recreation, and educational programs we bring in from the outside. That's our star program, let's say, mostly because of the numbers, how many kids we have. It's got to be one of the largest on Long Island.
That really is a fantastic 800. That's to give you an example, my local high school has 400 in the entire high school, and you're servicing 800 kids.
Yeah, well, it's in 4 buildings within the Elmont Union Free School District. There are 6 buildings. We would love to get into the other 2, but funding restrictions just make it so that we can concentrate on the 4 that we do.
I wish you were around when I was in school. I would be so much smarter, Mike. I know you think I'm dopey, but I could be brilliant if I had someone there helping me after school, tutoring me, working with me. I really think that's a great idea and a great way to work with kids. Pat, what was your background for this? I'm just guessing before I ask the question. I'm thinking it's probably going to be something you were a cowboy or an astronaut and something totally different.
No, I wasn't a cowboy or an astronaut. As a matter of fact,
I always wanted to interview a cowboy astronaut.
I can make believe if you like.
Pretend. Yeah, let's pretend.
No, I started out doing social work and actually getting paid for it when I was 14 years old. I grew up in the Bronx, and I still live there, as a matter of fact. In the Bronx, there was a lot of problems with redlining of apartment buildings and not giving heat and hot water and things of that nature. So I became, thanks to a friend of mine, Father Borstelman, a junior community organizer. And the junior community organizer would go into buildings, in apartment buildings, and say to people, "What's your problem? How can I help you?" And most of them were heat and hot water issues, believe it or not. They just weren't getting it. And they had this little 14-year-old guy walking into the building saying, I can help you with those problems. And I did. That was the scary part. I was able to go to court. I was able to do everything that I needed to do because of the good training I had received on how to do it.
Now, Pat, you were a community organizer. Now, that's the nice term. I think politicians call you troublemakers, right? Isn't that the way they describe you? No, and each one is seeing it, of course, different.
Well, we were troublemakers in a sense because we were trying to get what was good for the people in that particular community. We just wanted to help. And a lot of times, yes, local elected officials could be difficult. I remember at one point sitting in Mayor Koch's office, that's how long ago this was, and having probably about 200 people standing in front of the glass doors that go into the mayor's office. And he was nervous. There was 200 people banging on that glass saying, we want our rights. But Ed Koch, I have to admit, came around. He turned into one of our biggest advocates and gave funding to the organization that I worked for at the time, the Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition.
That says a lot about you and him for both sides, that they work together, etc. But I can just imagine that the mayor looking at this and saying, what is this all about and who's their leader? And then they point to a 14-year-old over in the corner. It's him. Oh my gosh! Do I have to buy cookies? Am I supporting a school? Is it a little league field? And here you are. I mean, you have real problem. I mean, heat, obviously, where people live, etc. These were real problems. But I'm sure when he looked at it, it's like, oh my gosh, why did I come in today? So
I'm sure he did. But at the same time, as a community organizer, I stood in the background and I let the tenants get up front. They were the ones who he really saw, not necessarily me. I would whisper in their ears and tell them what to say, but they did all of it.
And that's
talking.
a win-win because you knew these are his constituents. He wants to please the people. These are numbers you're bringing in front of him. These are potential votes and people who can praise him or kind of have negative things to say, let's put it that way. So you knew the game. And
I was taught the game.
Taught the game, but did it well.
So you sort of served as like a gateway to solving the issue.
Tried to. And then later on started to do it in a different manner when I worked on the streets as a youth organizer, they called it at the time. Drugs were a real problem in the area that we were working in. It was in a section of the Bronx where it was pretty tough. So we would try to give kids alternatives to using drugs. Now, that was difficult when they were making a lot of money to be able to sell those drugs. They would almost laugh at me and say, I make as much in a day as you do in a year. But I always told them that the difference between me and you is that you will either be dead or in jail before long, and I won't. I'll still be out on the street. You come and follow doing the things that I do, and you'll be able to come out too.
I like Pat's approach. Longevity over quick death, but a lot of money in your pocket at the time. So yeah. I'm with you on that.
And now, when you actually were assigned as this executive director of this program, what was the agency presenting in programs?
Well, it was much smaller than it is now. They used to have a program where they would use the local library to do some after-school help, mostly homework assistance, things of that nature. And I think at the time they were dealing with about 14 kids a day. Now we're up to 800 just in our after-school programs. So we've built it up quite a bit. And funding is built up a bit as well, too, because we diversified our funding. But we can talk more about that later.
Pat, what do you do to change the perception, or is there a good or bad perception of the GYO in the community? Did you have to do much to change it? Were people favorable toward it? How did they look at it?
Well, people were favorable toward it, but it had to be for a special kind of kid. We talked about working with at-risk children. Mm-hmm. So every parent would say at the time, that's not my child. My child isn't at risk, so they don't have to go to this program. One of the things that I did was I got out to civic associations, student PTAs, anybody I could think of, to go out and let them know that every kid is at risk. They all have to make choices about drugs, alcohol, sex, a million different other things. And if we can have some kind of a say in how they handle that, or at least give them some advice that they can use to be able to make their own decisions, then we would be able to, hopefully turn the tide on drugs and alcohol. It worked quite well, although we had some very disturbing stories in the Bronx as well, too, at the time. But everything seemed to come through and work quite well in Elmont, and that's how we grew the program, by trust.
Now, for our listeners, that's where you work out of now. Is that correct, Elmont?
Yes.
Can you tell the listeners if they're looking to find your organization, where they'd find you, how they would get in touch?
Sure. The organization is at 534 Elmont Road in Elmont. And if you wanted to contact us, you can either contact us by email, which is gyo1300@aol.com. I know AOL is very old, but I've got so many people with that address, I wouldn't want to take it back right now. And our phone number is also 516-328-1550.
And we'll ask you that at the end of the show also again. So if someone didn't get it, if you want this information or you want to copy it down for a friend, we'll give that to you before the show is over. Mike?
Well, before we continue, I just want to add that you are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Mike Demarco, along with Bill Horan, and today we are learning all about a non-profit organization from right here on Long Island called the Gateway Youth Outreach. GYO's goal is youth development and preventing adverse behavior by enhancing the community's efforts to provide an environment where adolescents can develop self-awareness while engaged in productive and healthy pursuits. Our guest is Patrick Boyle, their executive director. Now, what programs have worked well and which went by the wayside, so to speak?
The programs that work the best are obviously the after-school program. You don't get numbers like that because you're not running a good program. So that was one of them that really is, like I said, a shining star in our cap. The other one is counseling. Now, a lot of these kids need to be able to talk to somebody. And quite often they get all of those types of services from the school through the social workers and school psychologists and things of that nature. But there are also some kids who don't enjoy that type of counseling. How long have you felt this way? And I think we're dealing with anger issues. So my approach to counseling is quite different. And when I say quite, you can underline quite. I talk to them as though we are equals, number one, because we are. And I also talk to them in a way that they would talk on the street. I told you, I grew up in the Bronx. I'm not afraid of using language that is not necessarily the most accepted type of language for social workers. But what I found over the years is that it makes children listen to you. High school age kids won't listen to you if you don't talk their language. And that's what I try to be able to do. That's been very successful for me over the years. So that's where our programs go on that level. One that went by the wayside was a great program, but it just became too expensive and too dangerous. It was called the Nippom Program. It was children using mini bikes, and we would have a contract with the children, high school age kids. And if they did what they needed to do within the contract, we would allow them to ride mini bikes and maintain mini bikes. And we did all of this with the help of Belmont Raceway. Belmont Racetrack has always been a partner with GYO because of the proximity. The problem with that one program was insurance rates went through the ceiling, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So we had to really let that program go. And it did start becoming a little bit on the dangerous side, so we didn't want anybody getting hurt, and that was a big part of it, or us getting sued.
Yeah, Pat, when you were talking, I just couldn't help but think, when you talk about talking the language on the street, that almost sounds like a thesis paper for a doctoral student, that how that would react, like taking two groups and one talking the way the typical high school teacher would talk to them, as they should in the classroom. And the second would be someone like yourself who uses the street language because this is what the children know, this is what they've grown up with, and they feel more comfortable with it. It's like talking literally a foreign tongue, I guess. If you go to another country, they're going to know you're from the United States. But if you fit in, they're more comfortable, you're more comfortable, and it's a win-win. Now, you mentioned about Belmont helping you. Where do you get funding from? Who pays for all this?
Well, funding comes from everywhere now. It used to be solely from Nassau County and the Nassau County, what was then called Youth Board. Now it's the Office of Youth Services. We moved from there to anywhere that somebody had jingles in their pockets, I would go after it. So it's not usually personal, regular individuals, but it's a government. So the town, the county, the state, the federal government all fund us now at some level or another. Our programs cost almost $1 million a year to be able to keep everything up and running. But that's because we hire people from the community. We have 45 young people now. The number is usually 114 young people, high school and college age students, who work as counselors in our program. So the money that they receive goes right back into the community again. And that's why we do it with young people. And also, too, young people have the energy at the end of a school day to be able to work with these youngsters who are running around all over the place.
Mike, I just have to ask this question because I'm getting a vision. Based on Pat's experience, what he already told us, when you go to a group for some money, okay, do you just happen to walk in, we'll call it the Ed Koch effect, with 200 unruly children and say, we're going to stay around here most of the day, so we're going to be playing with your computer and your phones, unless you'd like to make a small donation or a larger donation, in which case we'll get out of here in about 3 minutes? Is that you're laughing, so I kind of think it is. Your face is turning red. Look at this. Look at right before us.
Well, I don't do it exactly that way because I don't believe in using children as pawns, in a game of chess to be able to get money out of government agencies. But there is always the potential there that could happen.
And they kind of know
point.
that. I bet you just drop a hint that if we don't have an office, we might have to come over here most days and spend it in your office or in front of your building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You must have read my biography.
He's a very smart man. This is why he's the leader of the organization.
And from what I understand, you don't charge clients, right? It's fully nonprofit, or
no? For the counseling component, there's never a charge for any of that. For the after-school component, what I found was that if you give something away for free, people don't appreciate it as much as if you charge a small amount of money even for it, because then they feel a little bit of ownership of the program because they paid for it. So they can tell me, you're not treating my kid right, or my child isn't getting their homework done, or whatever else. So we do, for the after-school program, we charge $450 a year if someone can afford it. It breaks down to about $1.25 an hour that we're charging to be able to provide the programming. And I can only do that, obviously, because of the grants that we get coming in. It costs think about it. It's $1 million a year budget. It costs a lot more than $450 per kid per year to make that happen.
And the professionals, and as you said, the insurance, everything, we all know, we all hear those words, the price is going up, and it's not your fault, it's not the store's fault, but it's all around us. So.
Yeah, and the funding usually doesn't go up in comparison with that. So you have to, the people who run youth service programs are business geniuses. Not myself, but the other people who do it. They're geniuses in the way that they can cut and still keep the amount of programs provided. They're not as good, maybe sometimes, or could be better if there was more funding involved. But they'll still make it happen, because people who do what I do don't do it for themselves. They care about the community. I didn't stay here for 33 years. Which, by the way, yesterday was my anniversary on Martin Luther King Day.
Hey, time for a party. We can use any excuse for that.
But I didn't stay there for 33 years because I don't like this community. I love the community and the diversity and everything else that happens there. That's why we do it. And that's why we, instead of social workers, we become businessmen to bring in enough money to make it happen.
Now, you mentioned, Pat, that you were in Elmont. And big news about Elmont that we're hearing this year is the Islanders. Does that affect you at all? Does that have any good, bad, negative, or neutral effect on what you do?
No, it has all good effects on what we do. They've always, the Islander organization, even when they were back in the Coliseum, have always been very generous with what they've done with us. They provide us with equipment to teach kids about floor hockey. They provide tickets to hockey games so that kids in our community aren't hockey buffs. Hockey, again, is one of those expensive sports to play. So they're really not able to, go out and play hockey, but they can go and watch hockey. So we've gotten quite a few free tickets from the Islanders, things of that nature. The one thing that we're missing so far is there was an agreement with the Empire State Development Corporation, who oversees what's happening over at the UBS site, UBS being the Islanders Arena. And one of the things that they had agreed upon was for the Islanders, really Sterling Management, who's the company over there, to build a community center in our area. And that hasn't happened yet, and I haven't heard too much about how that's moving along. But hopefully this radio program might help that along a little bit, and maybe we can start to get some answers about when that's going to happen.
Mike, you see me grinning, so I have to ask Pat, do you still have those 200 kids someplace that they're available? That they can just walk? Now there are 200 businessmen, doctors, nurses, etc. Maybe they could go over there and...
Well, that's a possibility. You want to keep things nice and calm at the beginning.
Right. No, we're only kidding, but you have such a good approach, though, so if it works, it works.
Well, before we continue, I just want to add that you are listening to My Hometown on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Mike Demarco, along with Bill Horan, and today we are learning about a nonprofit organization from right here on Long Island called the Gateway Youth Outreach. GYO's goal is youth development and preventing adverse behavior by enhancing the community's effort to provide an environment where adolescents can develop self-awareness while engaged in productive and healthy pursuits. Our guest is Patrick Boyle, their executive director. We saw an article about how you helped kids back at the beginning of the school year by handing out school backpacks. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
That's another thing that the Islanders have helped us out with quite a bit. Tanya Laws, who's one of their community relations people over at the Islanders, goes out and gets as many different types of school supplies as she can. And then we hand them out. Usually it would be at a registration for the program that we hand them out. This year we didn't have the same kind of registration because of COVID restrictions and things of that nature. But we did manage to get out book bags and all kinds of supplies to these kids. Think about that for a second, though, what the Islanders just did. They made it possible for the parents not to have to make that choice whether I put food on the table or I go out and buy my kids these supplies. So that's super helpful in a community like ours that they're able to do that. Not everybody is so poor that they couldn't afford to be able to get these things. And I don't mean to say that Elmont is a completely poor neighborhood. It's not. But there are people there who could really use that kind of help so that way they wouldn't have to make that choice. Rent, food, or school supplies. School supplies are going to be last on that list, I'm afraid, and the kids might not get what they need if it wasn't for the Islanders and other individuals who also donate to us.
Pat, if someone is listening and said, how do I get to be part of this wonderful operation? How can I get my child into it? How do they contact you? What should they expect? Is it 1 hour a week, 1 hour every day, 10 hours a week? What's going on?
I'm sorry, it's 3 hours every single day that school is in session. Because we do use school buildings to be able to provide the programming. So if school's closed, we can't get into the building, so we can't provide a program there. And our office is so small you could barely fit 10 kids in it, never mind 800. So, that's they can always come and ask about availability right now. As you well know, it's very, very difficult to hire people right now. We're having a very hard time hiring counselors and are looking for counselors on a regular basis. And because the state has a 1-to-10 ratio, for every one counselor, you can only have up till 10 children in the program. So we have to keep those ratio numbers or our insurance would not pay off if we did something wrong. So we need to be able to make sure that we can have enough staff people to make those programs work and have the ratio.
And how do they contact you? Give us that contact information again.
It would be either at we're located at 534 Elmont Road in Elmont. You can either contact us by email at gyo1300@aol.com, or you can contact our office at 516-328-1550.
And it's the Gateway Youth Outreach. And the nice gentleman we're talking to is Pat Boyle, and he's the executive director. So you're talking to the big shot. He knows how to get things done.
Far from it.
Pat, tell us some of the future plans. Where is the organization going in the upcoming months and years?
Well, the community center I mentioned, I think GYO would like to be involved with that in the beginning and then hand it off to another group with a board of directors who would be able to do everything. But we're kind of the only game in town that does, the type of work that's necessary to be able to get a community center off the ground. So we're hoping for that. The other thing is that we would like to get into more buildings with our after-school programs, because I think that they're very, very beneficial to the community, and we would like to get more kids involved. Of course, that means more funding, and we'd have to find a way to be able to do that.
And if we have any landlords out there, perhaps if they have an open building or a space that's available, they could probably get in touch with you, and you might find a way to use it productively?
There's a possibility. We're pretty good with space right now, but thank you for the idea.
Okay, I'm trying for you.
I know you are. We actually own the building that we're in. That's something that's rare for a not-for-profit as well, too. But I have a very good board of directors, and they guided me on how to be able to do that. One is the attorney for the board, Christopher Rosado, and he said, you're going to be paying rent the rest of your life, and it's crazy. Let's find a way to buy a building and make this work for you so that way you don't have that rent expense.
Look at that. He even said something nice about a lawyer. I don't think we've had anybody ever compliment their lawyer as an ex-lawyer, former lawyer. I don't say ex-lawyer, but former lawyer. Thank you.
He's a great lawyer, and he's smart as a whip.
Christopher Rosado. We'll mention his name again. So you'll get a Christmas present next year from him.
And what do you think are still outstanding issues affecting youth in the community that need to be addressed, I guess, in this day and age?
Yeah, it goes along with some of the counseling things that I do. Drugs are a problem, and it's not in Elmont. It's not drugs that are opioids and things of that nature, although they're there, obviously, and they're present, but they're not the main thing. High school-aged kids who are smoking marijuana now, or weed as they usually call it, that's a real issue. And the issue is more because they're doing it thinking that it's legal and it's okay, because it is legal. But it's only legal for people over 21. These kids don't understand that their brain hasn't developed yet, and they're making a decision based on a non-developed brain, and sooner or later it's going to catch up with them. And I'm hoping that, we can be able to do something along those lines. And then there's just the community as a whole. The community needs lifting up. The community needs to have the things that it deserves. UBS Arena is a great start. Belmont Racetrack, from what I'm hearing anyway, is thinking about renovations to that part of the building, that part of the area. And then we have a beautiful library, all on Hempstead Turnpike. You throw a community center in there, and you have a beautiful strip that comes into Elmont. People won't avoid it.
Pat Boyle, we want to thank you for being with us today. To our audience, Pat Boyle is the executive director of the Gateway Youth Outreach Program. Thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, and it was fun.
Always. That's the best part. I'm Bill Horan. I'm here with Mike DeMarco. We thank you for listening to this special edition of My Hometown.
We'd like to get your feedback on My Hometown. Send your comments to WHPC@ncc.edu. Nassau Community College, where success starts and continues. Till next time, this is Bill St. James. And remember, there's no town like your hometown.